Good morning, good evening. Welcome, everyone. This is Karen Lozada again from the Consulate General in San Francisco. Welcome to day 3 of our virtual innovation mission program on hydrogen to British Columbia and California. We're very excited today for another list of excellent speakers, and we hope a very interesting program. Today, we'll also, just a quick run through the program. We're going to show you a little video presentation just after my talk here, and then we'll start with the plenary discussion on research trends. This discussion will be moderated by Dr. Ruven Fleming from the University of Groningen. He's an assistant professor in energy law and the moderator of a very interesting blog, of climate and law blog, that you should all look into. We'll follow that with a pitch on the Green Village Living Lab, which is a location at the TU Technical University in Delft, and then followed by a thematic session with a large number of speakers on the production and sourcing of hydrogen, green hydrogen. We'll wrap up today with a little discussion about next steps. So I'll make some announcements on the things that we're planning to do after these 3 days. It doesn't just stop here. We're going to be doing more and exploring more topics, and there will be more opportunity to participate in a more interactive fashion as well. And then we'll have some closing remarks. So first, I'd like to start with a little video presentation of the Dutch hydrogen ecosystem. Thank you.
The Netherlands is extremely well positioned to make a success of the hydrogen supply chain. We have strong industrial clusters already producing and using a lot of hydrogen. We have big ports that can become hydrogen hubs also for the import and export of hydrogen. We have a huge potential for offshore wind to produce green hydrogen. We have extensive gas infrastructure which can be repurposed to become a hydrogen backbone, including cross-border connections. And we have strong technology clusters.
So here in the port of Rotterdam, all the elements of the hydrogen economy comes together. From large-scale import terminal towards production from offshore wind, towards pipelines that connect the companies in the port of Rotterdam with the production site, but also connecting Rotterdam to the rest of Northwest Europe. So we clearly see already the impact of hydrogen here in the port of Rotterdam, and also we see it accelerating towards the future. It's a huge potential. We work together with different regions and different companies on local, national and international levels, all the way from startup towards international companies. And for example, we have a connection with the Hydrogen Valley in Groningen and also the Kleefse Waard in Arnhem.
We're here in the eastern part of the Netherlands, and more specifically at industrial estate Kleefse Waard. And this is really the pinnacle of the production of hydrogen equipment. Within this region, there's tremendous effort on bringing hydrogen further. Companies like Hygear, who produce hydrogen as a manufacturer, companies like Dinosaur, who actually produce batteries based on hydrogen bromide, which is kind of an in-between for storage towards hydrogen solutions, and a company like Netstack, who builds PEM fuel stacks for hydrogen. It's important to build a complete environment to make the next step. So it's a triple helix approach. Governments, research, and industry need to work together to make the next step.
The Dutch government is very much committed to support this development. Hydrogen is an important element in our climate agreement. So we will work to create the right conditions, regulation, legislation, safety, financial instruments for innovation, for scaling up.
Yeah, also here in the northern part of the Netherlands we are very ambitious about hydrogen. Together with Shell and Gasunie, Groningen Seaports as a port authority, we started a project. It's called North H2. And in this project we produce wind offshore, transport this electricity towards the ports, make hydrogen out of it, and then transporting it to the customers, the industrial customers in the Netherlands, but also in other parts of Europe. In this project we will generate 10 gigawatt on electricity in 2040, and with this enormous amount of energy we will produce 800,000 tons of hydrogen. And these 800,000 tons of hydrogen will reduce the CO2 emissions in this area with 7 megatons a year.
International partnership is key for the speedy development of the hydrogen market. We are very keen on developing partnerships with other countries. We welcome companies, knowledge institutions from other countries to come to the Netherlands and see what's going on here. We also very much support Dutch companies to go abroad and learn from developments in other countries.
As an embassy, we promote and facilitate collaboration between Dutch and Japanese parties. We organize missions, public-private partnerships, webinars, etc. We make use of a good network of advisors and decision-makers from both countries.
The Dutch approach to the energy transition and the role that hydrogen plays in this transition is super interesting to California, precisely because California has the most ambitious decarbonization goals of the entire United States. And we found there's lots of mutual interest in our approaches and that we can learn a lot from each other. Building a carbon neutral energy system is a huge undertaking, and not one country can do it on its own. We need to come together and make this energy transition a reality.
Cooperation in such a big project is key.
We have to work together in order to make sure that we can use each other's resources and can share the knowledge that is needed to make this transition happening.
This is a joint effort from parties in the Netherlands, parties in Europe, parties from all over the world. That's why we are very keen on having international partnerships.
Welcome back. We're back here. Thanks for your attention for this video. We're very proud of what we've been doing in the Netherlands, and we have a very ambitious hydrogen strategy that's nationwide. We're going to continue on with the next presentation. All of the speakers are lined up and ready to go. So I'm going to give the word to Dr. Ruven Fleming. He is the Assistant Professor in Energy Law at the Groningen Center of Energy Law and Sustainability at the University of Groningen. Ruven.
Thank you very much, Karen, for the nice introduction. Welcome, everybody, and welcome here from the Hydrogen Valley. Indeed, we are in the city of Groningen, right here where all the magic happens. We have a wonderful program for you today. We have a panel on research trends with 3 very interesting speakers. 2 of them are engineers, one of them is an environmental economist, and we will come to that in a second. Indeed, I'm an assistant professor, I'm a lawyer by training, and we at the Groningen Center of Energy Law and Sustainability are working on the whole energy chain of hydrogen, starting from production through transmission and distribution to ultimate end use of hydrogen. We're looking into the regulation and the laws that apply to all of this. For today, we are expecting every speaker to have about a 10-minute go at his individual topic, and then at the end we'll have around 10 minutes for a Q&A session. So let us start right away with the first one, who is also a speaker from the Netherlands, Lennart van der Burg, and he is actually not an engineer, he is an environmental economist, and he is coming to you from TNO, which is the independent Dutch research organization doing all sorts of research, and his topic is actually green hydrogen development. So Lennart, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ruven. Good morning, good afternoon, audience. The coming 10 minutes, I will go fast forward toward the key challenges for electrolyzers we are facing today. And as being said, TNO is the applied research organization in the Netherlands, and in the energy domain, we work with 700 researchers on basically fighting climate change and looking for next generation technology in wind, solar, and on hydrogen, where we're talking on today. Maybe the next slide. And if you look at hydrogen in this slide, you see our activities. My presentation mainly go into hydrogen production, but obviously we're talking about the complete value chain. So we need hydrogen production, and we need to transport it, we need to store it, and we need a sufficient end use in fuel cells or in synthetic fuels. And that's innovation we are working on together with industry. If you go to the next. Yeah, and actually there's only one reason where we go towards hydrogen, and that's obviously climate neutrality. Hydrogen should play a key role there for the routes where there's no other option. So where the energy saving or direct electrification is not an option. And that's really the key why we should go for hydrogen. And the Netherlands is well positioned because we've got a potential of 300 gigawatts offshore production in the Greater North Sea. And there's only one way we can utilize the complete wind energy by converting that to hydrogen and put it in the energy system. And if you go to the next slide, you see the infrastructure challenge. Our infrastructure in the Netherlands, if you look at the electricity infrastructure, there's only 20 gigawatts. If you look at the potential of the gas infrastructure, there's a factor of 15 larger than in terms of capacity. And that's the whole reason why I was just talking about. If we want to integrate all the renewable energy in our energy system, the gas grid is really optimal because it's basically can transport a lot of energy in the Netherlands and also into to the neighbor countries like Germany. And obviously, as we saw in the introduction video, we've got huge ports which are already importing lots amount of fossil fuels, and yeah, hydrogen is an option which can be replaced. So if we go to the next. So these are the four main challenges if you look at electrolysis. There are roughly 20 companies worldwide who develop PEM or alkaline electrolyzers. And these are the four main challenges where we're looking at right now. If you look at the current market, this year only 100 megawatt electrolyzer capacity will be installed worldwide. So really at the bottom of the S-curve. So everything's about upscaling. Upscaling because the IEA is thinking of not 100 megawatt, but 60,000 megawatts yearly installed capacity, which is needed. So we need to multiply a factor 600 year on year on year. So the main targets are cost reduction, obviously, industrialization. We need more and more renewable electricity, and we've got a scarce material thing. And in our research, what we are doing is obviously the trade-off, because there's a trade-off because you want an efficient electrolyzer, you want them low cost, you want to have durable. And that's obviously a trade-off because if you use cheaper materials, it's effective on the efficiency. So if you go to the next, I will go a bit deeper in the scarce materials. Because really, if you look at the PEM electrolyzer, iridium is used. And the availability of iridium is really limited in worldwide. So that's, if you go to the gigawatt scale, we need all the iridium worldwide to actually supply that for the electrodes in the PEM system, and same for alkaline. And you see different scenarios, and we also looked at different scenarios. What are solutions on that? So we can reduce the amount of loading we work on from 2 milligram per square centimeter towards 0.2. We can obviously recycle it. We increase the productivity. So there are a lot of strategies, but we really should look at, because otherwise we're creating another problem. And this report can be downloaded on the website. If you go to the next. So the circularity is an issue. The second one is upscaling. And then we definitely should learn from what we saw in the solar and battery. As in solar roll-to-roll, battery 3-day infrastructures, because if you use 3-day electrodes, your efficiency can go much higher. And that's why we talk, if you use this knowledge, we can develop a next generation electrolyzer. And then if you go to the next, you get a feeling of the numbers. Here you see the numbers worldwide. Solar is on 150 gigawatts. Fuel cells is 0.1 gigawatt. Fuels is actually 1 gigawatt 2019. And electrolyzer, as you said, 0.1 gigawatt worldwide. So if you, and from energy, we're thinking of gigawatt. If you look at from a manufacturing point of view, we talk about million square meters of production capacity of the membranes, of the electrodes. And here you see the need for production, and also the high performance quality which is needed for electrolysis. Long lifetime, high current density, the costs are still high, so we really should learn from these technologies for upscaling of these electrolyzer technologies. If we go to the next. And this is developing the supply chain is really crucial. And I mean, to understand each other, it's really important. Where are we talking about? So obviously we've got the hydrogen supply chain, so producing the hydrogen towards the end user, but we also have the material supply chain, and that's the blue and the orange boxes. So actually developing the electrolyzer itself, the balance of plant, the system, the stack, and if we really go further in the stack, you go to the orange boxes, and there you see the membrane, the electrodes, and even the machines who are actually making the membranes. And that's the supply chain is not completely developed. Actually, there are 2-3 membrane suppliers in the world. So if we really want to grow these electrolyzer technology, we need more suppliers in this field. And then we go to the next. Yeah, so this is actually the build-up of the electrolyzer stacks. For the one who are in this field, they know the components, and actually the MEA is the most costly elements of the electrolyzer stack. So that's really a focus point of our research, reducing the cost. Really go to ultra-thin membranes, ultra-thin electrodes, which obviously have a great benefit of your efficiency. And if then we go to the next, here you see the supply chain and the different partners. And this actually should grow, as we at least should have 5, 10, 15 companies for each material, which if we really go to the gigawatt level. And if we look to the next slide. So this is really interesting. The last year we talked to 150 companies in the Netherlands, and we found out that 80 companies in the Netherlands already are active or have capabilities of supplying these materials, the electrodes, the membranes, the systems, actually making these electrolyzers. So we have really good capabilities in the Netherlands. And we're now talking with Germany, because Germany has some really strong OEMs who actually have now already products in the market, like Siemens, like ThyssenKrupp, like Sunfire. And actually our vision is that, if you go to the next slide, our vision is really that, we're looking at generation, and you see different generations. And the first one is upscaling the current generation electrolyzer technology. So we, as in the Netherlands, we can develop the novel components supplying to the current electrolyzer, but already thinking of next generation electrolyzers, which really have novel components inside, where we have low radium approaches, where we can get rid of the scarce material issue. Obviously look at breakthrough technologies. And then we go to the next slide, because this is the main challenge. If we look at cost reduction, if you go to scale, we can realize 1/3 of cost reduction just simply by upscaling. If there will be more demand, we are going out of the R&D labs and we're getting high volume manufacturing. But if we really want a further cost reduction, so the other 2/3, and then we looked at the next graph, then really innovation needs to become in place, because we need other materials, we need other components, we need really thin membranes, for example. So there's really innovation which are in place, and I think there research institutes is playing a key role, because the black box, you see the fuel cell joint and the taken targets, and actually we should actually go below that. We're seeing current prices are around €1,000 per kilowatt, and we should go to like €350 kilowatt for a complete electrolyzer system. So if we go to the next, and you can think of these optimization challenges. So higher current density, higher operating temperature, larger stack size for the alkaline is already large, but the PEM stack is actually getting larger. Material reduction, and the last thing, improved balance of plant design, because now all the solutions are containerized, and we should actually focus on more complete, if we really go to gigawatt scale, complete industrial plants, which we will need complete redesign. So it's not simply stacking, but redesign a complete system. And then if we go to the next. So if we really look at electrolyzer growth scenarios, and this is the point I want to make. If you're looking at generations, we're really at the beginning. So the first generation will supply maybe the first 10, 20 gigawatts. But the IEA was saying we're ending up with 3,500 gigawatts of installed electrolyte capacity worldwide, 3,500. So we definitely should think in generation now, putting the first generation in the market, but work on the second and third generation with other capabilities. And it can be a PEM or an alkaline stack, but it can even be an IM or a high temperature solid oxide, or a mix between those two. And if you go to the next, and this is really interesting one, 2 weeks ago, our CEO, Paul de Krom, handed over this high-speed innovation position paper to the Vice Executive President, Mr. Timmermans from the European Union, together with the leading research institute and also including NREL, how we actually can increase the learning rates. If we look at solar have a learning rate of 28%. If we want to reach that with electrolysis, we really should focus on, for example, data sharing, because a lot of money is now going to be invested in the first pilots. European money, investment funds, innovation funds, Green Deal, and we actually should focus much more on sharing this data, because otherwise this data is only getting it to a few limited amount of companies. And if we increase the data share, we can learn much faster. And also the high-tech equipment industry can learn from how they can improve the products. And that's actually the main message of this high-speed innovation research paper, which can be downloaded as well. And now I'm going to round off, because So all our research is actually happening here. This is in Alberta, our research energy campus, and the red box you see our Faraday lab. And if you go, I think, to the last slide, this is our Faraday lab, and this is actually what you're seeing in the background of me. You're probably thinking, what's these strange boxes? But these are actually electrolyzer pen stacks, and here we really do on a small centimeter square research on these improved components. And and one of the advices in the HighSpeed Innovation paper, we actually should cooperate with other research institutes, because there are, I mean, so many innovation challenges. So happy to cooperate with. Actually, we're now already doing tests with your US companies in this lab as well. So I think we should join our efforts. Thanks, and sorry for the speed, because I want to keep within the 10 minutes. Thanks, Ruven.
Thank you very much, Lennart. That was quite an interesting speech. Very good. That is very interesting to hear what is going on and what is necessary also from a technical side in terms of achieving the upscaling that we ultimately need for the energy transition. This is also a wonderful transition to the next speaker, actually. We will see you later, Lennart, when we have a Q&A. And we will now switch to Thomas Blank, who is the principal, the senior principal, actually, of Industry and Heavy Transport at the Rocky Mountain Institute. Welcome, Thomas. Good to have you here. And now that we talked about a bit the technical underlying challenges for upscaling, it would be interesting to hear more about what is actually the drivers and the inhibitors of hydrogen, and what are possible selected practical applications that you can envisage for the foreseeable future. So Thomas, very good to have you here, and please enlighten us on these important aspects. The floor is yours.
Sure, and before I drop into the slides, I'd build on Lennart's presentation and say, I think we're in a space in this industry which is moving very, very fast, and I would look at it analogously with how the solar and wind industries also, and batteries, have been moving very fast, and costs are coming down, I would say, you know, generally faster than predictions are, you know, typically forecasting, right? So literally yesterday, a coalition of 7 large energy players globally came out and said that they think they can reach this magical threshold of $2 per kilogram already within 5 years, which is at least 5 years ahead of the Bloomberg New Energy Finance forecast, right? So I think, again, it's moving very fast, and we should keep that in mind when we look at some of these cost structures and cost numbers. I can go into the slides now. So great. So first of all, I think it's important to keep in mind that a kilogram of hydrogen, while it's a kilogram of hydrogen, the impact of using that hydrogen in different applications is significantly different. So this chart shows comparison of how much CO2 is typically avoided when you use hydrogen for a number of different applications. So at the top, you have you know, a like-for-like exchange of thermal content. So basically, you burn the hydrogen to create high-temperature industrial heat, which is one of the application areas that has been discussed, where hydrogen could be a potential substitute for fossil fuels, right? And you can see that the impact on natural gas from substituting natural gas is slightly smaller than coal, basically because natural gas is a bit of a cleaner fuel than coal per BTU, if you like. Now, you have another application area which is similarly effective, which is the mobility area. So here, exemplified by trucking or shipping. Basically, this is the comparison is very close, whether you look at fuel cells with an electric drivetrain, or even internal combustion engines of ammonia, or, you know, different derivatives of hydrogen. But basically what you're doing is taking this hydrogen and then transforming the chemical energy in the hydrogen to kinetic energy of a mass that you're moving, right? So it's not surprising that the the saved CO2 emissions compared to oil-based products is very comparable, even though a truck and a ship is obviously very different from, from a design perspective. But from a physical perspective, it's quite similar. And now what's interesting at the bottom is that as an example of a industrial process is that hydrogen can also be a reagent or a catalyst in chemical processes. So in addition to getting the heat value out of burning the hydrogen or breaking the chemical bonds, you get a catalytic effect for the process that you're trying to make happen in this case steel making, where the traditional catalyst is coking coal and the carbon is used to bind with the oxygen in iron ore, and you get CO2 emissions. And instead you take hydrogen to bind with the oxygen and you get water basically, and that gives you a significantly higher impact per kilogram of hydrogen used than what you get in some of these other applications. Next slide. The second thing to keep in mind is that hydrogen enters markets in very different contexts. So this overview shows on a couple of different market characteristics that are either preferable for hydrogen, if you like, or supporting a hydrogen transition, or supporting the fossil fuel alternative, which in many cases is natural gas, right? And you can see that some of the leading markets in hydrogen development, so Southeast Asia here represented by a South Korean flag, and Europe are generally represented to the right of this exhibit, where while as a market like the US is generally much more to the left here. So in terms of what the cost of natural gas, what the cost of electricity is, and what the cost of renewables, policies in place, energy security of supply is a major concern or a major relevant topic when it comes to hydrogen versus natural gas, where Europe and Southeast Asia in particular is relying on LNG with a strike price 4 or 5 times higher than domestic natural gas in the US. And also security of supply in the US is equal to domestic supply, while as Europe and Southeast Asia are exposed to imports, and in many cases imports from Russia or other regions of the world where there are political concerns for that import exposure. Interestingly, at the bottom, I would say, the US in contrast, it's not squeaky clean here, right? So US also has fantastic renewable resources. I think the challenge is that they're really co-located with where you also have the world's lowest natural gas prices. So in places like Western Texas, you have solar and wind clearing at negative prices, literally, because you have production tax credits for wind. So you can sell the electricity at negative prices and still make a profit. But you also have fracking assets that are also clearing at negative prices, which basically means they're just flaring it because it doesn't pay off to put it in a pipeline and move it to the load zones on the coast. So that's a bit of a challenging situation, of course, from a competitive perspective. Next slide. One more thing that we find is quite important for how to get going on hydrogen, and we talked a lot, Lennart talked a lot about achieving scale in order to bring the cost down, and that is true. So, we also think of this in gigawatt increment, what you can do with a gigawatt, which is roughly a nuclear reactor worth of hydrogen. You can basically replace a single decent-sized steel mill, or you can replace some 30 or so large transatlantic ships, or you can fuel 100,000 fuel cell buses. So I think that goes a long way in terms of saying, how can you think about aggregating scale to a point where you can motivate this gigawatt scale of production. I think our conclusion here is simply that it's going to be very challenging to get to this scale purely with mobility, on-road mobility applications. So you need to get engaged with heavy industry and port clusters and all kinds of combined off-takers to secure sort of lock-in demand at the scale we're talking about, right? Next slide. So what I'd like to sort of round off with are 3 challenges that we see are at the very core of scale up. So what are the 3 things that are holding back investment? So one thing is considering these different increments of scale. When you build out, demand in or increment of scale of 5 orders of magnitude less than the typical generation asset, and then you put in pipelines to move the hydrogen, which probably is in the 10 gigawatt equivalent of scale, you suddenly get a very unbalanced utilization of these assets. So typically when you put solar into a power grid, you know that you can have offtake for that power because you're putting it into a very large market. That's not the case for hydrogen. You're putting it into a very nascent market. So if demand and supply capacity and transmission capacity are not matching, and when they're ramping up in different sort of staircase shaped curves, and some of them are more linear, you'll have massive utilization volatility of assets. And that's just a strong challenge for project finance and trying to understand what the cash flows of these assets will look like after they go into the market. And to address that, we think there are 2 things that you could do, and obviously more, but one thing you can do is to look at kickstarting markets in clusters, and the other is to consider markets that are sort of reservoirs where there is some flexibility of offtake, and that could be things like existing hydrogen markets. So fertilizer markets, they're already using hydrogen, and where it comes from doesn't really matter, so they can flexibly pick up or more or less of the green hydrogen, if you like, into their feedstock. Or natural gas grids can blend with a little bit of variability in the blend, and that is such a large market that it makes for a lot of flexibility for the hydrogen production, right? The second inhibitor is the role and understanding the role and potential of a seaborne market. So for other large energy commodities, coal, oil, natural gas, one of the enablers has been the opportunity to sell into a seaborne market. On one side, that means that you have the reservoir, if you like, because if you have oversupply, you can put it into the seaborne market and you can sell it somewhere else and you get more flexibility. But you also get really helpful things in the market like an actual globally traded commodity that enables you to set up a futures market if you get enough velocity of trading, and you can lock in some of those future cash flows for your project financing and so on. So and finally, you can, in most seaborne markets, you do get a larger profit pool because you can monetize the fact that some of the sources of hydrogen have significantly lower cost, and that create some windfall profits that you can monetize, build cash, and reinvest in growth, right? And thirdly, and I'll try to keep it short, is around where you draw the line in the sand between centralized and distributed production. And the challenge here is that piping hydrogen is really cheap. It's up towards 10 times cheaper to move energy as hydrogen in a pipeline compared to moving it as electricity in a high voltage transmission line. So that speaks for highly centralized electrolyzers and then piping the hydrogen to your users. However, as soon as you get off the pipeline grid, it gets disproportionately expensive because moving hydrogen around in trucks, the last mile distribution, that is all very expensive. So that speaks for distributed generation at smaller scale to avoid a lot of that added cost. So I think the jury is out still on where that line in the sand is drawn, and no one wants to sit on infrastructure having built out too far towards the customers and then ending up having that infrastructure stranded 10 years from now, which is definitely within the investment cycle of such a large infrastructure investment. So that is also an area where there's just a lot of risk involved in moving investments into this space. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Thomas. That was a very good and interesting presentation. And that was exactly what we need to discuss, the drivers, but also the challenges that are there. And while you have approached this now from the higher area, maybe it's an idea to zoom in from the meta level now and go to the next speaker, Walter Merida, who is Associate Dean of Research and Industrial Partnership at the University of British Columbia. He is Professor of Mechanical Engineering, and he actually is planning at the University of British Columbia to sort of have a small test set, which he will talk us through about he calls it the hydrogen test bed, and maybe some of the bigger challenges that we just heard from Thomas about might come back in there. So Walter, please enlighten us on what you are doing at the University of British Columbia.
Thank you very much, Ruven, and thank you to Lennart and Thomas. It was a perfect introduction, I think, to the things I wanted to talk about. And first of all, I guess I should explain the dinosaur piece. So let's go to the next slide, please. The drawing that you see there is, my daughter is actually great at drawing, and one time we were looking at a book on evolution and so on, and we came across this picture of a feathered dinosaur. And very quickly we got into the conversation of how the first feather had nothing to do with flight. In fact, the first animals that had feathers on them could not fly. Then, of course, what you see in the middle is the Canadian goose, a very symbolic bird for us Canadians. And of course, that bird is using the feathers for flight. But what you see on the next picture is the black heron from Africa. And what that bird is doing is using its wings as a canopy to fish. So by putting a kind of a canopy on the water, the fish congregate under the canopy and the bird can fish. And the only point I want to make is that in the same way that the first feather was not meant for flight or fishing, I think the first energy system applications are going to unravel innovations similar to the one we have seen from the industrial and then the IT revolutions. If you could go to the next slide, please. And unfortunately, the numbers are a bit scrambled, but I can just walk you through them. This is just to give you a sense. The University of British Columbia is, of course, in British Columbia, in Vancouver. The 50 at the beginning is referring to the $50 per ton of carbon dioxide, which is our current carbon tax. It's not the current value, but it's going to go to that level, especially after the federal framework gets harmonized. The 0.35, that's our target for the tons of CO2 that we want to produce per ton of liquefied natural gas. And those of you in the industry will recognize that as a very aggressive target. The current world level is about 3 times larger. 56 million is the approximate population when you add up British Columbia, Oregon, California, and Washington State. Same time code, same time zone, same codes and standards, same language. It's a very interesting market also because Silicon Valley is now moving into a green, I think, revolution in innovation. 950, that's the number of millions of dollars that the federal government has put into what they are calling the Canadian superclusters. And British Columbia is hosting the digital supercluster, which is one of the 5 major clusters in Canada. $1.5 billion is the amount of money that the provincial government has announced is going to devote to a recovery package, which is going to build on a government document, the Clean BC document, which has some very aggressive targets like 15% renewable natural gas content by 2030 and zero emission vehicles. All new cars are going to be zero emission vehicles by 2040. Next slide, please. So, UBC and the picture behind my background is not accidental. We are a large university. Despite being next to one of Canada's largest cities, Vancouver is the city that you see at the top of the image. we are in many respects a remote community. And that may sound like a strange thing to say, but we are separated from the city by a park. We are at the end of the natural gas line. We are at the end of the electricity grid. And for all practical purposes, we operate as a small municipality. We have our own permitting and procurement processes, and that gives us some challenges, but also some opportunities. And one of the opportunities is this initiative that we call using the campus as a living laboratory, which essentially is a de-risking exercise. What we do is we put some of our operating budget that, for example, we needed to add additional heat and power capacity. Rather than buying an off-the-shelf power plant, we looked for partners, industrial partners, to build a first of its kind biomass gasification plant on campus. And what this does is it de-risks the first prototype because the university becomes a risk-tolerant first customer for that new technology. And in addition to that, we couple our research and innovation capacity to that development. So our professors and our research institutes help in the development of that new prototype. And that's the initiative I wanted to describe to you. So if you go to the next slide, please. So what we have done is we are taking a city block on our Vancouver campus at the corner of Westbrook Mall and Thunderbird Boulevard. And the website that you see there, you can have a look at the project there. And this site has one of the largest parking garages on campus. It's a 4-story parking building. And what we are doing is first of all, we are installing about 1 megawatt of solar arrays on top of the parking garage, not because solar energy makes a lot of sense in British Columbia with a lot of hydro and with a price of electricity from 4 to 6 cents a kilowatt hour, but because we want to explore the next generation of diagnostic tools, the next generation of high voltage connectivity for solar energy. Also, solar energy has very mature and robust performance and cost data that we can use in good techno-economic models. We are aggregating as many electric vehicles as we can in that single garage. And maybe we can go to the video because I'll just walk you through the video now, and that will give you a sense of the pieces that are coming together in this project. So we are taking the parking garage, as I said, and we are going to add the solar array. And then we want to aggregate as many electric vehicles. We already have 70 or 90 charging stations on campus, but we want to aggregate as many electric vehicles as we can in this single building. And then we are going to make the recharging infrastructure for those vehicles reversible. So the vehicles will be able to both charge from the grid or the solar array and then return power to the grid when needed. And by using only a small percentage of the battery capacity and without significant additional investment, we have created a large battery on campus that then can be used for intelligent energy storage. Next to the parking garage, we are going to build a hydrogen refueling station, which is going to use an electrolyzer. And that refueling station, of course, will be used to fuel heavy and light duty vehicles on campus. But part of the hydrogen, we also plan to take and inject into our campus energy center, which is a building that hosts 3 natural gas boilers, which we plan to run on a blend of natural gas and hydrogen, or maybe replace one of the boilers with a fuel cell technology or a pure hydrogen boiler technology. Of course, once all this infrastructure is operating, we will need to connect and monitor it. In September of last year, we became the first 5G campus in Canada, and we are going to use a mixture of the Wi-Fi and 5G technologies to connect all these separate pieces of infrastructure. And we plan to develop digital twins on the cloud. And once we have learned the business cases and the safety and cybersecurity issues with this technology, of course, you can then transplant these results into other parts of the city or other applications. The Port of Vancouver, as you may know, is the largest port in Canada and is poised to grow significantly in the next few decades. So some of the learnings that perhaps we can have in these integrated energy systems can be translated in the form of control tools or monitoring software and so on. And the international piece is very interesting for us. So we are in discussions, and before the pandemic, we were in the process of capitalizing on our partnership with Australia. We have some very good partnerships there, and we would love to have similar partnerships in the Netherlands and in the rest of Europe. So if we could go back to the presentation, please. I'll just quickly show you just a few glimpses of some of the technology development that we are working on. So on the hydrogen production side, we are looking at blue and green pathways. So on the blue side of things, we have a thermal cracking technology for methane that basically bubbles natural gas through a bed of molten metals. And then by virtue of cracking the molecule in that way, the product of that reaction is solid carbon. So basically you still produce carbon, but you do not produce carbon dioxide, and you produce a solid carbon material that could perhaps find markets for different applications. The other piece is supercritical water electrolysis, and that's basically electrolysis of water at supercritical conditions. And there are a number of reasons to explore that area. But one of them is that, of course, it is much easier to pressurize a liquid than it is to pressurize a gas. And if you electrolyze the water at high pressure, you may reduce some of the compression costs associated with fuel delivery. The next one is early stages. We are just starting it, and we just published or submitted the first paper. And that's basically direct water photolysis, where we split the water molecule by shining light on catalyst materials without generating electricity. The efficiencies are, of course, very, very low, but that could be a game changer because you would avoid the need to generate electricity. The first pathway gives us a cost for hydrogen under $2 a kilogram, and we are in the process of scaling the prototype up with some partners. One area that we have not started, but that we would love to collaborate in is liquefaction technologies. If we are talking exports, I think the cost of liquefaction is going to be one of the barriers. If you go to the next slide, please. The other area that we are working on is some very sophisticated and advanced models to start adding some intelligence to the decision-making of infrastructure deployments. So one of our first models looks at the geographic distribution of refueling stations based on population and vehicular demand and so on. We have started with only light-duty vehicles, but we have run the models now for heavy-duty vehicles, and we are in the process of preparing the relevant publications. The other area is to start evaluating the effectiveness of policies. So one of our publications tries to evaluate the different policies for hydrogen in terms of how many kilograms of CO2 could you avoid per dollar of subsidy, or how many dollars could you reduce the price of hydrogen by per dollar of subsidy. And you can follow the links if you're interested. So I think I have my last slide coming up. And, you know, going back to the dinosaur and the feathers, I think the first phone was not meant as a movie delivery device. The first car was not a telecommunications center on wheels with very large batteries. And I think the first cities, you know, the assets in cities that were meant to just maybe hold cars for parking can now become intelligent participants in city scale energy transactions. And the software tools and the understanding as to how to optimize those types of systems is one of the areas that we are working on. The final comment I would make is that in Canada, we have a very interesting opportunity between the provinces of Alberta and British Columbia. Alberta has a lot of natural gas resources, and it also happens to be sitting on one of the largest underground formations on Earth that could provide significant storage capacity for carbon dioxide. And with that, I will thank you for your attention, and I will be happy to participate in the rest of the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Walter. Thank you very much. It was very interesting to learn what you are doing at the University of British Columbia, indeed. So we have about 4 minutes for a quick Q&A round. And I would like to actually ask all 4 speakers, because we will probably not be able to do a lot of questions, but maybe briefly from the industry perspective, it would be, I think, pertinent to at least, you know, flag 2 or 3 things for your particular regions, being it the Netherlands, being it the US or Canada. What are for the industry the drivers and the challenges, particularly when we're talking about the uptake of green hydrogen at the end of the day, because this is, I think, the main buzzword that is going around. So maybe, I don't know, Thomas, maybe you want to make a start?
Sure. I think in the US, clearly the challenge is the low cost of natural gas at the moment, and how you know, I think the economic inflection point is further away compared to many other regions, right? We will obviously see what happens with the new administration coming on board in second half of January. I think what has been leaking out of Biden's climate action plan includes a couple of subsidy programs or tax incentive programs targeting hydrogen systems. So without, you know, those details will obviously have to be developed by, that's a potential market booster, if you like, that can make a significant difference.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much. And Lennart, I mean, in the Netherlands, you will have a new government sooner or later, at least next year. What is your take on that? What can the industry in terms of green hydrogen expect for the next, let's say, 6 or 12 months?
Yeah, I think from a government side, especially European Union and also the Dutch government and Germany and France, there's a heavy investment in green hydrogen in the billions of euros in different countries. So that's not, I think that there's a lot of support. The difficult thing, and there's a lot of debate the last week even in the Netherlands, is do we have enough green electricity? Because green hydrogen is only required if we have enough green electricity. And it's just difficult because we should see green hydrogen as an enabler for getting that electricity there. But it's really influencing also policy making. So we should do the debate not only on just on headlines, but really understanding the role of green hydrogen electrolysis in the whole energy transition as a key enabler. I think that's really crucial for understanding it, because all the governmental funding, especially in the Netherlands, is about CO2 reduction. Our core focus is CO2 reduction, getting to the 60% CO2 reduction in all Europe, or 55% the next decade. And that's the core. And to be honest, hydrogen doesn't, green hydrogen is not for the short-term reduction. Green hydrogen is only for the hard to decarbonize sector. And that's the difficulty where we're in, which it's a more longer term. Even, I hope Thomas is right, it's much faster, but yeah, that's a difficult thing where we're now. Yeah.
Right. Thank you very much. So you have some mixed feelings about the prospects, I see. Walter, you said in your presentation that you are looking into both blue and green hydrogen. So what are your views on that? What is the future for green hydrogen, and is there a future actually for when we talk about industry uptake?
Well, yes, I think, and I was very happy that Thomas had that great slide on the differences in magnitudes between applications. So, you know, the steel industry, one mill could be as a very significant demand point. So that's, I think, one of the key messages that we need to communicate to the public, but also to governments, that, you know, hydrogen is not just about transportation, and certainly not just about light duty vehicles. But to answer your question, I think in Canada we have a very interesting opportunity, I think, because even before the pandemic, there were some significant government initiatives. I mentioned the Clean Fuel Standard, for example, may become a federal initiative, not just provincially as we have right now in British Columbia. And, you know, depending on the numbers you look at, that measure could have a 30 megaton impact on our greenhouse gas emissions profile. So there will be some significant opportunities. There is definitely markets developing for green hydrogen, in the sense that we now have zero emission vehicle mandates, both in British Columbia and in Quebec. So on the transportation side, at least, there is a little bit more certainty. And I think your overall question was, what are the challenges for the industry? And I think one of the challenges is certainty. You know, we had a very fragmented market, if you like, in Canada, because we are small. And I think only now the fragmented climate policies are being harmonized across the country. So that I think will be very good. In terms of blue versus green, I think British Columbia has a lot of hydro capacity. Most of our electricity is already green. So we have a clear opportunity to develop that. I would say that in addition to production, we need to look at distribution, and maybe if we are looking at export, liquefaction technology. So I think liquefaction is one of the areas that has not received a lot of attention. In terms of green hydrogen, Alberta, as you know, is our main, is the center of the energy universe in Canada, but it's a universe that's centered around fossil fuels at the moment. I think they have an opportunity to fully utilize the significant infrastructure investment that they have to repurpose it to hydrogen production and couple it with carbon capture technologies to make it, blue hydrogen. So I am excited. I think Canada has a great opportunity to become a global leader in this area.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Walter. Unfortunately, our time is up. So thank you very much to all three speakers, Lennart, Thomas, and Walter. And we gained some very interesting perspectives, I think, also on the trends a bit on hydrogen research. And with that, back to you, Karen.
Thank you, Ruven. Thank you for a great session. Thank you to our speakers. I think even more than the last 2 days, I feel even more a sense of urgency when it comes to hydrogen. Sounds like we're all really excited about the momentum. One of the things we're really excited about in the Netherlands is the opportunity for demonstrating technologies. And so we're really excited to have Lidewij van Trigt as our next speaker, who's going to tell us something about the Green Village Living Lab. She's the project manager of energy and mobility at the Green Village. And this is one of the demonstration sites, a very interesting one that we're showcasing right now. Lidewij, can I ask you to present your village?
Sorry, need to unmute first. So thank you for the introduction. Okay, I see my slides in the corner. So I'm Lidewij van Trigt and I work for the Green Village. And I'll tell you in the next 10 minutes about what the Green Village is and also about what we have to do with hydrogen. So you see the picture of the Green Village, and we are situated at the campus of Delft University of Technology. And what we do is we are a living lab, and we are working with support of the university. But we are also an independent non-profit organization. And we have a small team of 12 people. We are all committed to make the world a bit better place, a bit more sustainable. And what we do is we facilitate innovation projects. And all those projects are in the field of sustainability in the built environment. And in the previous slide, you saw a photo. And that photo is almost a year old, and it's already outdated because things are changing all the time in our living lab. So this living lab, you see now a picture, a render of our terrain. It's a living lab for innovation and real life testing. So it's like a real village, but it's a safe environment to test things. And it's all about sustainability in the built environment. And the parties that come to the Green Village to do their research and their testing, that might be scientists, but that's also companies and some governmental organizations. And we also have a lot of students who use our terrain to do their tests and their projects. Can I have the next slide, please? Okay, so why is the Green Village such an attractive place for testing? Well, it's open to the public. So if you do a project at Green Village, you're really visible. There's many interviews and articles, and we also have tens of thousands of visitors per year. There's ministers, there's scientists, there's large companies, there's students, there's school kids. So everybody is visiting us and seeing all the projects and hearing about the projects. The other thing is that it's an environment with real people. So at the Green Village, it's like a real village, and there's also people living in the Green Village. So we have 7 houses, and we have different people living in those houses, and they're part of the living lab, and they're part of the tests. We also have quite some network. So we try to matchmake people and to match our project with interesting, for example, new clients or people who can solve their problems, which makes it really interesting. And they also meet the other projects and they get to nice ideas and they think of new projects together and work together. So one other thing is that we have a lot of infrastructure and facilities that every project can use. And an example of infrastructure is a direct current energy grid, also a low temperature heat network. We have solar panels, we have a data platform. You can put your product or service in one of our buildings. You can change things, you can make a hole in the ground and put your project there. So there's many things you can do to what you can't do in another place. And one of the examples of the infrastructure is also a hydrogen gas pipe, which you can use for projects. There's less regulation at the Green Village, so it means that not every you don't have to be that careful like in the real world. For example, the building code doesn't apply, which makes it more simple to build a house, for example, which isn't like the other houses in other places. And also we have a huge scientific network. So we try to matchmake projects to scientists or to students, and which helps them to get more knowledge to their project. Can I have the next slide, please? So our philosophy is that innovation projects are not only about technology. So you'll never make it to the market when you have issues in other fields like legislation and standards, or if the business case doesn't work, or if there's a problem with the social acceptance of the product or the service that you're making. So we try to help all the projects that use the Green Village Living Lab to find out what the other challenges are and maybe help them with a start to solve those problems. And you can think of questions like, what about privacy for my product, or is it reliable enough for the business case? Can I have the next slide, please? So here you see the 3 focus areas of the Green Village. So we try to work on these 3 topics. One is climate adaptation, and the other one is sustainable building and renovation, and the third is future energy systems. And the hydrogen projects, which we have, are part of that last topic. So in the previous years, since 2017, we have had over 80 projects using our Living Lab. And 3 of those projects have to have hydrogen aspects. So next slide, please. So this is the first hydrogen project that we host. This project is an initiative of 3 Dutch grid operators. And they have been building a natural gas network at the Green Village. And this gas network is exactly the same as we have everywhere around the Netherlands, but then for natural gas. And the test is about can we use this natural gas network for hydrogen distribution in the built environment. And what the grid operators are trying to solve is how can we make new working processes for hydrogen, because it's not the same type of gas as natural gas, so we need to change our work processes as well. And they also use this project to educate their gas experts, because working with hydrogen is completely different than working with natural gas. So this is a place where they can get some experience and actually work with this new gas, and also get enthusiastic about it. They also try to solve many questions about hydrogen. For example, won't this hydrogen cause noise in the pipes when it's going through? Or can we work with this gas, which you can't smell? Is it safe enough, or do we need to add something so we can smell it? So next slide, please. So another project that we have that works with hydrogen is H2 at home. And H2 at home uses the gas network that I just described. So what they will do is they will heat one of the houses of the Green Village, and it's now on natural gas, and they'll change this house from natural gas to hydrogen. And what they try to learn is how can we do this in a safe way without unnecessary and expensive measures. Because if we put too many sensors in this house and make it completely safe, then it will be too expensive. And there won't be a future for this kind of type of fuel. They also like to demonstrate with the project that it's possible to heat a house with hydrogen, and then it works. And they like to prove that their products, for example, their gas pipes and their safety systems are suitable for hydrogen. And this project is about to start, so the safety preparations are almost done. And in the beginning of next year, I'll expect them to actually start. Next slide, please. Well, this is the third project that we have about hydrogen, and this project is just at the beginning. And the plan is that together with the Faculty of Electrical Engineering, we will change one of the student houses at the Green Village. And this student house will be completely independent of the electricity net. It will have solar panels and an electrolyzer. So if there's electricity extra, we can change it to hydrogen, and then there will be hydrogen storage, and also a fuel cell to make electricity again at the moment that there's no sun, for example. So this house will be completely autonomous. And what the faculty will like to learn is how to control this system and how to make it work in an efficient way. And also calculate what the best scale would be for such a system. We know that one house is not a good scale cost-wise, but what is it one entire village or maybe a larger area? So how could you apply this system in the real world? So this was my last slide. I think I'm almost out of time. I'm not sure if there's time for questions.
Marnita. Thank you, Lidewij. That was fascinating. I think what's really important to highlight is that you touched on two things that we haven't talked about in the last 3 days, and that is hydrogen in the built environment, which is a very important topic for the Netherlands, and also end user involvement. So the public facing aspect of this project, I think, makes it extra interesting. One brief question is, if there are viewers who are watching right now who have hydrogen technologies that they would be interested in testing out with you, is that an option? What are the opportunities for international participation?
Yeah, so our Living Lab is open to everyone. So you can come to the Green Village and use our facility for testing and research. I think when you're in Canada or the USA, it might be a bit too far away, but maybe you can participate with other parties in the Netherlands and then do a project together. And everybody's welcome to come and visit us when it's possible.
Thank you. I think that last point, when it's possible, but we'll be looking for those opportunities as time goes on. Thank you so much for your presentation. That was really interesting. We're going to have a little transition. I'm going to ask my colleague, Walter de Wit, to join me on stage. He's the Innovation Attaché here at the Consulate General in San Francisco. And we're going to have a slight break during this transition. So thank you.